It all started with a chance encounter at a party. Lucy met Ben among mutual friends, and from that moment, her heart belonged to him. He was kind, attentive, and surprisingly listened to her like no one had before. She felt there was something special between them. Lucy decided to share this with Laura, her twin sister, as she always did. One evening, filled with happiness, Lucy showed her sister a photo of Ben on her phone and shared a little about him. "Can you believe it? He loves to travel and plays the guitar. He's so cool. I really think I like him." Laura took the phone, staring intently at the photo and holding her gaze a bit longer than necessary. There was a glint in her eyes, something Lucy didn't quite understand right away. She brushed it off. "He's so cute. And you say he's single?" The question seemed a bit odd, but Laura didn't think much of it. However, Laura couldn't get Ben out of her mind. At first, it was light curiosity, but it quickly turned into an obsession. She browsed his social media pages, read his posts, scrolled through photos, and gradually created an illusion that Ben could be hers. While Lucy lived in anticipation of their next date, Laura only thought about how to turn the situation to her advantage. When Lucy went on a work trip, Laura decided to take action. She messaged Ben pretending to be her sister and set up a date. At the cafe where they met, Laura impersonated Lucy, using all the details she knew from their previous conversations. Ben didn't suspect a thing, they looked so alike. But the date went too well. Laura not only enjoyed the moment but also became convinced that Ben had to be hers at all costs. When Lucy returned and found out about the date, she was filled with rage. That evening at home, a fight broke out between the sisters. "How could you do this? You had no right to date him," Lucy shouted, barely holding back tears. "He should be with me, not you," Laura yelled back, her face twisted with anger. "You always take the best of everything, but this time I won't back down." Before Lucy could react, Laura grabbed a kitchen knife and lunged at her. Her eyes gleamed with a rage bordering on madness. Lucy barely managed to dodge and ran into her room, slamming the door just as the knife struck it with force. Her hands trembled, and a single thought raced through her mind. "This is my sister. Why is she doing this?" The police arrived quickly. Laura was arrested, but the court decided she needed treatment in a psychiatric hospital. During the interrogations, Lucy learned that this wasn't the first incident of aggression from her sister. Laura confessed to the doctors that she wanted to kill Lucy so that no one would stand in the way of her being with Ben. She didn't do it out of loss of control. She acted coldly, convinced that this was the only way to win his love. Lucy sighed with relief when Laura was sent for treatment, but the fear never left her. For 5 years, she tried to live a normal life, married Ben, and together they started a new chapter, although they hesitated to have children. The past always felt too close. Every call, every unknown number on her phone screen made her flinch. While Lucy tried to move on, Laura, confined within the walls of the psychiatric hospital, hadn't forgotten about her sister or Ben. She behaved perfectly, participating in therapy, following all the doctor's orders, and showing exemplary behavior. She convinced everyone that she had healed, but in her mind, there was only one plan: to return and finish what she started 5 years ago. And that day came. Laura was released. The doctors said she had recovered and posed no further threat. But behind her calm smile lay a cold desire to complete what she had started 5 years ago. One evening, Lucy heard a knock at the door. She approached with a slight fear, afraid to even breathe. She opened the door and found her sister standing there. Laura held a small bouquet of flowers and smiled. "Hi, Laura. I'm so glad to see you. I'm better now. We're sisters, right?" Laura said, embracing her. The hug was long, too long. Lucy felt the blood drain from her face. She realized that the nightmare had returned. The kitchen was cozy and quiet. Lucy sat at the table, intently watching Laura, who sat across from her with a cup of coffee. Her fingers gripped the mug so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Lucy couldn't shake the thought. Why did she come back now? And right when Ben is away on business. Are you happy to see me? Laura asked, squinting her eyes and leaning slightly forward. Her smile was cold, almost sinister. Lucy tried to remain calm, but the tension between them was almost physically palpable. She knew this wasn't just a coincidence. After so many years of silence, Laura's appearance was a harbinger of something bad. "I thought you weren't coming back," Lucy replied quietly, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. "I thought so too," Laura said, taking a sip of her coffee. "But some things can't be left unfinished, can they?" Their eyes locked, and for a moment it felt as if time had stopped. In this silent duel, there was no room for apologies or forgiveness. "Why are you here?" Lucy could no longer hold back. "I just wanted to make sure you're doing well. Or maybe I just want to take back what was supposed to be mine," Laura whispered, her voice tinged with sarcasm. Lucy felt rage boiling inside her. She shot up from her chair, but before she could react, Laura snatched a knife from the table. "Laura, no!" Lucy stepped back, bumping into the table, but it was too late. Laura lunged forward and attacked her with the knife. Lucy tried to dodge, but her sister was fast and strong. They struggled, knocking over dishes and chairs, their bodies entwined in chaotic combat. "You've always taken everything from me," Laura screamed, clutching the knife. Her eyes blazed with mad fury. "But this time you won't win." Lucy fought with all her strength, but Laura fell on top of her, pinning her to the floor. In the frenzied struggle, the knife stabbed into Lucy's side, and she gasped sharply, feeling the metal slice through her skin. Her hands grasped at Laura weakly for a few more seconds, but life was quickly slipping away. "Now everything is as it should be," Laura whispered, breathing a sigh of relief as Lucy fell silent. Breathing heavily, Laura got up and stared at her sister's body. Her hand trembled slightly, but a crazed satisfaction ignited in her eyes. She wiped her hands on Lucy's sweater and removed the ring from her finger. "Now I am Lucy," she said to the empty room. She carefully lifted her sister's body and dragged it down to the basement. The old, cold space seemed the perfect place for a secret that no one should uncover. Laura found an old trunk, placed Lucy's body inside, and closed it tightly. "Rest easy, sister," she whispered before shutting the basement door. A few days later, Ben came home. He wearily entered the house, set his suitcase by the door, and called out, "Lucy, I'm home." Laura, dressed in Lucy's clothes, came out and smiled at him, perfectly mimicking her sister's expression. "How was the trip?" she asked softly, stepping toward him and kissing him on the cheek. Ben paused, surprised for a moment. There was something strange about her behavior, but he shrugged it off as fatigue from their separation. "It was fine, just tired," he replied, rubbing his neck. "How about you? What did you do while I was gone?" "Oh, nothing special," Laura smiled, but a slight hint of triumph glimmered in her eyes. "I just waited for you." Ben felt something was off. Lucy seemed different, nothing like he was used to, but he decided not to press it right now. Surely everything was fine. Probably, little did he know that the real Lucy would never return. A few days had passed since Ben returned from his business trip. He noticed that his wife had changed, but not in the way he expected. Lucy had suddenly become overly affectionate and even a bit clingy. Every moment she tried to be by his side, bringing him breakfast in bed, calling several times a day to check on him, and never leaving him alone at home. "You know I've always loved you more than anything," she said one morning, snuggling up to him and running her fingers through his hair. Ben smiled awkwardly. Lucy had never been this clingy. It threw him off, but he tried to explain it away as her just missing him during his trip. But something else troubled him more. Felt like she was trying to completely change their lives. One evening, Ben noticed that Lucy had decided to get rid of some of their important belongings. Photos with friends were gone. Her old dresses had disappeared, and the beloved album gifted on their first anniversary was suddenly missing. "Why are you throwing all this away?" he asked, surprised. "We have a new life now, Ben. I want everything to be perfect. No old things or memories that don't matter," she replied. He could only remain silent in confusion, as those words were nothing like his wife. One day, while Lucy was in the bathroom, Ben accidentally stumbled upon a strange document among her things. It was a medical record with the name Laura Gray. His heart raced as he read the diagnoses. Paranoid disorder, propensity for violence, and prolonged hospitalization in a psychiatric facility. Laura Gray? Who is that? Further in the documents, it was noted that Laura had a twin sister named Lucy. This shocked him. Lucy had never mentioned a sister. There had been no hints of it at all. What the hell? Ben whispered, feeling the ground slip away beneath him. Now he had to find out what happened the day he left for his trip. With dread and nerves tearing him apart, he turned on the security camera footage from outside their home. On the screen, his wife appeared, opening the door. Ben's heart sank again. Standing on the threshold was another woman, exactly like Lucy. At first, they talked, but their conversation quickly escalated into a heated argument. The women began to scream at each other, and then they lunged at one another. Ben couldn't tear his eyes away from the screen. One of the women suddenly pulled a knife from behind her back and, with unexpected fury, attacked the other. Lucy tried to dodge, but her attacker was quick and strong. Ben watched as his wife struggled to break free but couldn't. Just when he thought the screams had quieted, the woman leaned over the victim, trying to keep her down. Lucy's face turned red with strain as the knife struck her. At the moment Lucy fell, and her attacker, breathing heavily, dragged the body into the basement. Ben felt a dryness in his throat. The unexpected revelation left him frozen. Lucy was not who she claimed to be at all. She was Laura, the sister who killed her twin to take her place. Recalling all the strange events that had happened since then, he realized he could wait no longer. Ben sat in the kitchen, staring blankly at the wall. His mind was racing, and only one thought echoed in his head. This isn't my Lucy. As he pieced together everything that had happened in the past few weeks, he felt a wave of fear wash over him. Laura wasn't just a sister. She was a killer. She had taken his wife's place and murdered her. The thought of living with someone who had taken the life of his beloved sent him into a panic. He grabbed his phone, but at that moment, the door swung open with a loud creak, and Laura appeared in the doorway. Her eyes were ablaze with a mad light, and the smile on her face looked unnatural. "Want to talk?" she asked, her voice dripping with irony that sent chills down Ben's spine. He steeled himself and began dialing the police, but suddenly felt her hand intercept his, crushing the phone in his palm. "You decided to expose everything?" she asked, her voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. "You shouldn't have done that." Ben recoiled, but Laura already knew. In her eyes, he read the horrifying truth. She wasn't going to stop. "I've always loved only you, Ben," Laura confessed, her face pale but her eyes still burning with wild excitement. "I couldn't let her be with you. You have to understand. I did this for us." Ben's heart raced. All the moments of happiness he had shared with Lucy vanished. Only hatred and disgust remained. He reached out, trying to push Laura away, but she was quick and stronger. "You killed the only woman who meant anything to me. I hate you," Ben shouted, filled with despair. Suddenly, Laura snapped. Her smile twisted into a terrifying grimace, and she lunged at him, tightening a strap around his neck. Ben tried to dodge her, but in a split second, she caught him off guard. The strap constricted around his throat, and he felt his breathing grow labored. "You can't leave me," Laura screamed, her voice erupting like a volcano filled with rage. Ben struggled to break free, his hands grasping at the strap, but Laura was relentless. She tightened her grip, and the world began to fade. His eyes widened in horror as he realized he could fight no longer. In his mind echoed the final thoughts of Lucy, how she had been the light in his life, and how everything had vanished. "You're not leaving me, Ben," Laura whispered as he slipped into unconsciousness. Darkness enveloped him, and in that moment, Ben understood he had become a victim of his own terror, while Laura had turned into his merciless fate. Laura sat in the dimly lit room, transformed into a macabre mausoleum for Ben. His body, dressed in an elegant suit, was displayed as if in a refined showcase. She spent hours preparing him, braiding his hair, delicately applying a light layer of powder to preserve his untouched beauty. The room was adorned with delicate white flowers, giving it an illusion of festivity. Laura frequently approached Ben, unveiling a fine dining set. She poured wine into glasses, one of which she extended toward him as if he were alive. "You always loved red," she said, sipping the wine and closing her eyes, savoring the moment. She placed the glass on the table beside him, and in that quiet room, a false sense of comfort lingered in the air. Every day, Laura dressed Ben in new elegant shirts, unbuttoning them with tenderness as if preparing him for an important event. She smiled while talking to him, as if he were still alive, recounting everything that happened beyond the confines of that room. "You'd be proud of how well everything is going. I've done everything to make us happy, Ben," she whispered, stroking his face, her hand gliding across his skin, feeling their love surpassing death. But most of all, Laura loved playing at illusions. She tenderly fed him, holding a spoonful of food near his lips. Occasionally, she would bring a piece of chocolate, smiling like a mother feeding her child. "Tasty, right? You always loved this," she said, ignoring the cold emanating from the body that had long since stopped breathing. In the evenings, as the room darkened, Laura quietly played soft music. She sat beside Ben on the bed, embracing him, resting her head on his shoulder, and engaging in lethargic conversations about the future she envisioned for them. "You always said you wanted kids, right? I've already thought of their names," she said, prolonging the conversation until tears filled her eyes. Then she wiped away the tears and smiled, as if he were responding to her. But the evening hours became the bleakest. Laura slowly moved closer to Ben, her breathing becoming heavy, whispering words of love that had a sinister undertone. She made love to him, draping a sheet over him to create an illusion of touch and intimacy. Her arms wrapped around his body, and she felt the cold form becoming part of her nightmarish world. "You'll always be mine," she said, reaching for him, trying to feel his presence, but only emptiness responded to her touches. Each time she closed her eyes, images of their shared moments appeared in her mind, and in those illusions, she found her happiness. Ben's mother had not heard from her son in a week. It was too strange, as he always called, especially on her birthday, which she had recently celebrated. Her worry grew as she tried to contact Lucy, but she too did not answer. Doubts gradually morphed into horror. Eventually, she contacted the police, reporting her son and daughter-in-law missing. The police launched an investigation, heading to Ben and Lucy's apartment. Investigators spoke with neighbors, who confirmed that Lucy had been acting strangely in the past 2 weeks. They had even heard unusual screams coming from the apartment, which seemed to belong to a woman, but they weren't sure it was Lucy. The police decided to review surveillance footage from Ben and Lucy's apartment. As they examined the recordings from the past 2 weeks, they soon stumbled upon a shocking moment. Laura, Lucy's sister, killing her in a fit of rage. The investigators were stunned to learn that just a week later, Laura had also killed Ben, even though he had no idea what awaited him. They immediately headed to the basement of the apartment, where they suspected Lucy's body might be hidden. When they opened the basement door, their eyes fell upon a lifeless body, shrouded in darkness and wrapped in a sheet. Fear and disgust overwhelmed the officers as their suspicions were confirmed as a horrifying truth. After that, investigators decided to learn more about Laura. They ran her information and discovered she had previously been hospitalized due to mental disorders. Her history was filled with allegations of violence and threats of murder, especially towards her sister. With each new detail of the investigation, the horrific picture only grew more complicated. Laura turned out to be not just a sister, but a deranged being, filled with jealousy and hatred. The investigators contacted support services and prepared to apprehend Laura. They approached the apartment, filled with anxiety and determination. When the officers knocked on the door, an eerie silence responded. They decided not to wait any longer and broke down the door. After several decisive blows, the door swung open, and the police stormed into the room. Their hearts sank as they took in the scene. The room was draped in soft fabrics, with light barely filtering through closed windows, creating a dreadful atmosphere. In the center of the room was a couch, where Ben's lifeless form lay. Laura sat beside him, embracing him with a crazed glimmer in her eyes. "Laura!" shouted one of the officers. "Put your hands up." She slowly turned her head towards them, a smile spreading across her face, as if it were just a normal, joyful morning awakening. "You don't understand, he's just resting," Laura replied with a raspy laugh, stroking Ben's hair. "We're finally together, and it's so perfect." The police, witnessing this horror, could hardly believe their eyes. Ben lay on the couch, but he was not merely sleeping. His body was dressed in a festive suit, surrounded by scattered red roses. It seemed Laura had attempted to create the perfect setting for their celebration. One of the officers surveying the room also noticed horrifying details. Photographs of Ben hung on the walls, and notebooks lay on the table with writings that spoke of his happy days with Laura, as she had perceived them. "According to your accusations, you killed your sister and this man," declared the officer as he approached Laura. She suddenly clenched her fists and began to shake. "It wasn't me!" she screamed, but her voice already carried an element of madness. "I was just trying to make him happy." Laura was arrested, handcuffed, her eyes filled with insanity, involuntarily drifting back to Ben, as if she could not comprehend what had happened. After the arrest, the police continued to search the apartment. They discovered even more horrifying details that confirmed Laura's madness. Old letters from Lucy containing records of threats she had received from her sister, vicious notes about how Laura dreamed of an ideal life with Ben. "We need to take him," one of the officers whispered as they prepared for their final step. Just imagining what had happened in this apartment filled them with disgust. Laura was sent back to the psychiatric hospital, but there were no signs of despair in her eyes. As they led her away from the room, she whispered, "Now we'll always be together, Ben." Laura sat in her cell, hugging a pillow, envisioning it was Ben. Her gaze was vacant, yet a smile played on her lips. "We'll never be apart," she whispered softly, repeatedly trying to convince herself that their love was immortal, even in this hospital. So, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And remember, true danger may be closer than you think.